I remember having a project where we literally changed most of Salesforce's UI because they wanted it to look a certain way. And as much as you tell them, no, this is not a good idea, they still just want it, and you've just got to do it in the end.
This is Salesforce Ben Insider, the podcast that brings you all the top Salesforce news, insights, and trends, completely unfiltered. Join me, Ben McCarthy, and some great special guests as we dive into the Salesforce discussions you won't hear anywhere else. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SF Ben Insider, where we dive into Salesforce trends and insights into the ecosystem, where you're going to hear conversations you're not going to hear anywhere else. And today we are joined by Sam Walker and James Buttel.
Hello.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for being here. So me, James and Sam used to work for a company a few years ago that didn't have any targets, didn't have any managers.
Nope.
Salesforce consultancy. I don't think they're around anymore. Actually, I don't know why.
No, nothing.
But that's where we all met, and we've been friends in the ecosystem for a while. So when did you both join the ecosystem? It was a similar time.
It's probably like 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Yeah, I joined
You were before me, right?
Yeah, I joined a year before you. I joined 7 years ago,
So
Yeah.
and I've gone through 4 different consultancies, like usually like a year to 2.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Although I did a year during uni, right? My placement year.
Oh yes.
And then I went back to university and then came back to the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I
Great.
count those 2 years or just the 1 year.
Yeah, so 7, 8 years.
Something like that.
But today we're going to be speaking about kind of your roles are quite different now, but you both started as Salesforce developers, and I think Salesforce developers is possibly quite like I don't know, maybe secretive role to some people, because there's going to be a lot of people out there who have never worked with Salesforce developers, but obviously they're such a core part of the Salesforce ecosystem. But I would imagine that some people might even be confused about what developers actually do, why they're still needed in the age of MuleSoft and clicks not code and all that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to dive into today, and hopefully provide some insights into those that don't know what developers do, or if you're a developer, find out a bit more about what these two guys think, and then also speak a bit about developer careers and a bit about how to get in there. So
Sounds good.
So Sam, kick us off. Give us a bit of insight into your career.
Yeah, sure. So I started 7 years ago as a junior dev at one Salesforce consultancy, and then I did a year there, mostly doing what you do as a normal dev, like Apex, everything like that, and then moved on to the company where I met both Ben and James for 2 years, where I was just a normal developer. Then did 2 years there, and then after that spent 4 years at my next consultancy, where I became a senior developer, and then now I am a solutions architect for a new company. Still do lots of dev, still have to know lots of dev to be a solution architect, because technically I do both technical and config, so kind of got to know a bit of everything now. But it does differ which path you don't go down, really.
It's a bit similar to technical architecture then, maybe what you're doing now, because a normal solution architect would come from like an admin background, and they'd know about dev, but I don't know if they'd be able to code.
Yeah, technically, yeah. I mean, like, there is quite a lot of different names that get thrown around for jobs. Like, that is one of the confusing things. You'll see people say, like, they're like a front-end dev or a back-end dev, but like in Salesforce, it's kind of like you're a Salesforce dev, and then you'll also see like names thrown out like principal, which is basically just like an architect as well. But I think once you kind of get to a level where you've done like 7 or 8 years, you can do quite a lot. But for me, I've spent most of my time doing like developer work, so like that is the better stuff that I'm better architecting. But at the same time, I've seen most of Salesforce at this point, so I can kind of do a bit of everything.
And you're like 4 consultancies deep now.
Yeah, 4. Which when I say it after like 7 or 8 years, I'm like, God, is that a lot? But then in Salesforce, it's genuinely not. Like, people hop around all the time in different consultancies. Like, a lot of people will do it every like 6 months.
Yeah.
And for me, like doing a 4-year stint at one company is I'd say quite a lot. Because this current one, it's only 3 months. So in theory, this could be another 4-year one. So it might actually not be as bad by the end. But for now, it does sound bad when I say 4 and 8 years.
Nah, not too bad, I don't think.
2 a year.
James, so same question.
Yeah, so I actually started on my Salesforce career in my placement year of uni, so in between 2nd and 3rd year, where I started at a consultancy in London, and I did 3 months unpaid as an intern.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you weren't very good then, so,
True. And that was great. So I had to learn. I knew nothing about Salesforce going into it, so I had to figure out from the bottom up everything about Salesforce. So I started off as an admin. Pretty much, even though I did a computer science degree at uni, I knew how to code. I still came into Salesforce not knowing anything about it, so I didn't feel confident doing any of the coding side.
It would have been different languages, right? Like
Similar. I mean, it's
Java,
similar,
I
but
guess.
yeah, Apex is not. It's like its own thing, right?
Yeah.
Plus, the whole architecture of Salesforce is completely different and something you definitely need to learn. So I did that for like a year. Basically, got a few certs, I think, and didn't really do any code. And then went back to uni, came back, and then that's when I started actually doing some real dev stuff. And was there for a few years, and then moved on, did more dev stuff. Eventually got promoted to senior consultant.
More dev stuff after that?
More dev stuff.
More dev stuff. Always more dev stuff.
But it was always like different dev stuff. You know, it's not always the same stuff.
So, I mean, give us a bit of insight then into, because obviously your roles are different now. You both started developers, but Sam, you're more of a solution architect. So, you know, what does a day look like for a Salesforce developer at a consultancy?
Super different every day. Well, not every day. I'd say super different every couple of months. It really depends on what project you get put onto and in what capacity, like what role. So, for example, at the moment, I'm doing a lot of DevOps stuff, which is relatively new for me. Really enjoying it. But before then, I was doing a lot of build and integrations. So, working on a big integration, a bit of MuleSoft in there as well. And then before that, you know, it was mainly just Apex classes and triggers and a few LWCs. So it really depends on the project, I'd say.
So, I mean, now you said DevOps now, so you're actually not involved in building stuff on the platform, more like architecting pipelines?
Not really, no. At the moment, it's very much debugging and bug fixing if I am needed in like a technical capacity. I haven't really built anything new in a while, but yeah, mostly just like bug fixing and stuff like that.
It does depend on what consultancy you work for as well.
Okay.
So like when you're working at bigger consultancies like you are now, usually you're on one project at a time, whereas often if you're at smaller ones, you might be on 5 at a time. So you might be doing that DevOps role on one project, but you might be doing a build role on another project, and it can be completely different.
Yeah.
So I think what you've got at the moment is because you're on bigger projects at a bigger company, you tend to just be doing day in, day out similar things whilst you're on that project. You kind of just do that one role. And you don't usually do like the many hats type thing, which is much more common at smaller consultancies.
Yeah. I think the dream day of a dev is that you have something that you're building, and you just wake up and you just start coding, and then you log off at 5. You do the next thing every day. That's the dream, to just get stuck in, get your teeth stuck in something.
My friend, who's not in Salesforce but he's a developer, he described it as like the perfect job because it's just like dopamine hit after dopamine hit, like solving issues. Like you tick that one off, get a dopamine hit.
When it works, when it works.
But when you can be stuck on something for days, and it's
then
horrible.
You solve it.
And you solve it, and it's great. Eventually. But then at the same time, it's like that time when you're struggling with it, and if you don't have the people around to get help, it can be brutal. Like there's stuff online that you can get help with. But if it's like you sometimes working on, with it being dev, it's usually something very specific and very particular. That's usually why you're building something in code. It's like very niche. And then it can just take like days to find a solution to something, and you can just be working on that for so long, and it's not great.
And sometimes it will just come to you, like when you're trying to fall asleep or something, you know?
I've had stuff come to me in the shower.
Oh my God.
I think the kind of saving grace of Salesforce is like, I remember when we used to work together and there would seemingly be a requirement that just seemed impossible. We couldn't get something to work. There would always be something to make it work, right? As long as it's, within the realms of Salesforce or an integrating system, there is always something. It's just getting to that, stage via research.
And sometimes you might have to dial the requirement back a bit and say, like, there's a trade-off, like we can't have this, but we can have this. And I think that's just part of being a consultant, right?
Yeah, no, very true. So Sam, give us some insights. So, a lot of people who maybe haven't worked with a developer before, maybe they're an admin, they can do a lot of flow, they can do most things they want with Lightning App Builder. Like, why are devs needed in a low-code world? And not just needed, they're a huge portion of the ecosystem that is very in demand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, flows are great, and they have their own place, which is fantastic. But and obviously they are getting stronger every time, which is great. It means that it's like you have to use less code in places. But at the exact same time, when you work for certain clients, they do have requirements that are very different to what Salesforce can do on its own. And most of the time with Apex, you are doing something that they can't do in a flow. It can be something where it's like millions and millions of records, for example. Like I've worked for some giant enterprise level clients where if they want to be updating millions of records a day, you can't use flows for that. It's just not going to work. So you have to use Apex for it, and it's basically built in a way that it can use millions and millions of records, and it can do that completely fine. And flows can do that to a degree, but you get so much more control over Apex. It's usually a lot easier. And then even, so that's just with like triggers and millions of records, but at the same time, you'll have some clients who specifically want like something to look a certain way. And if they want it to look a certain way, you're usually going to have to do it in code. If they're like really specific with the way they want like a screen to look, you just have to do it that way. And
Is
like
that quite common then?
yeah,
Enterprise clients?
definitely. I mean, the way something looks is not just an enterprise level thing in terms of like there are even smaller clients who want their team to work in a certain way, so they're like, we have to have it look like this. And it's like they'll be like, oh, some of our like internal users might get confused if it doesn't look a certain way, and it can be the most frustrating thing to try and just get them to adopt normal Salesforce, but they sometimes won't do it. I remember having a project where we literally changed most of Salesforce's UI because they wanted it to look a certain way, and as much as you tell them no, this is not a good idea, they still just want it, and you've just got to do it in the end.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. Thanks for that. And then like just to kind of explore the kind of the interesting things you can do with code on the Salesforce platform. Maybe James, you can go. What is one of the coolest things you've built on the platform with code?
So I did actually have two answers for this originally, but I'm going to go with one. One of the coolest things, we're working for a real estate agency.
Oh yeah.
And we built I can't remember if it was in Aura or LWC, one of the two, but it was a really cool application where they could essentially click a button and it would open up a pop-up. And
they searched for like office space,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
so they searched for co-working office space for people.
Yeah, exactly. So then they'd click a button and like based on wherever that lead or that contact was, it would bring up that location as well, or like on a map, and it would pinpoint all of the different listings that this company had available. And then when you could click on an individual pinpoint and then go to the website that they had the listing on their own individual website, and then there would also be like a Rightmove link as well, and it would have like the distance between that and like different offices and that sort of thing. And from there they could also, I think they could draft proposals and send out emails.
I think it was like so you would find say 10 offices that your client could potentially like based on their specification and the radius of where it was, and then you'd like add them to proposal, and then you click a button and it would create an email with each of them in.
Yeah.
Like I mean obviously the manual
all these and send it off. Yeah.
And the manual work involved in that would if they didn't have that, it would just be massive.
So exactly. Yeah, it helped them a lot. Like admittedly it was I remember having to help them quite a lot because the training was pretty extensive because obviously it's a brand new thing to them. They have no idea how to use it, and they kept like sort of using it wrong for a long time. But that wasn't really their fault.
Always an end user problem.
So
that was interesting to help them with that. Yeah.
And that was, we were speaking about this before, but it was like, what was it? Google Maps API was used.
Yeah.
In that.
So the map section of the component was
it
Google Maps and Rightmove API as well. Yeah.
Which is for our US listeners, it's a property search website. I can't remember the equivalent in the US, but it's.
Do they have like Zoopla? Do they have Zoopla?
That's UK as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's another huge one over in the US and in other countries as well. But anyway, but yeah, no, that sounded very cool. And Sam, same question. Cool thing in Salesforce.
I don't have anything. Sorry, Ben.
Okay, cool. We'll cut that bit out.
cut that bit out. You did not give me the time to think about that.
So, all right. So, moving on, let's talk a bit about technical Salesforce skills. So, things have obviously changed so much constantly in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? I mean, we spoke about it in our first podcast episode where we talked about technical trends, but things are kind of starting to stabilize a bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, went through Aura to Lightning Web Components and then like workflow rules, process builder flows, things like that. But I suppose, it's kind of like a ongoing debate about Apex versus flows that comes up quite a bit. But I think generally the opinion is, or most people's, the accepted opinion is the one you just said, scalability issues you need to go with Apex, but flows can do quite a lot. And something very surprising in our recent developer annual survey was that this was just done by developers, and they actually said most people used an equal mix of declarative and programmatic,
Definitely should.
Yeah, which I mean, so has your attitude to that changed over the years?
Yeah.
Or
definitely.
So before you were like code.
Yeah. Well, I think it's only natural, right? Because flows used to be just so terrible. They weren't good. They were really hard to configure, and they didn't work half the time. Workflow rules aren't that great. They were only really used for very minor updates. So, like, yeah, I'm gonna say back in my day, like, back then, yeah, you had to use code for most things, or like process builder. I remember making a huge process builder for one client, and it was just the most like convoluted thing I'd ever built, and it was disgusting. And like nowadays, if I was to remake it, I could just do that in Flow really easily. But I think using like a combination of Flow and Apex where it's needed now is so much better, because it's a lot more readable, especially for people who aren't developers.
I mean, that's a good point.
The new Flow
it's more
builders,
accessible for
the new Flow builder compared to the one that used to be like 6 years ago. The one 6 years ago, people would still be like, go to devs to build flows because they were just so unusable. They didn't have any information on what like each nodes were doing. They were just really not good. But, I mean, that they just didn't really have probably the time put into it that they needed. Whereas now flows are like super intuitive. It's not really hard to do anything in there, which can be good and bad. It can be kind of dangerous as well, when like the fact that technically someone who has no concept of, because a lot of what you're doing in flows is like programming rules in a way. It's like it is like, even though you aren't writing code, it is kind of like you're using like little stepping stones.
It's like concepts of code.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like the fact that you can put loops in there is a little bit concerning, because people can build flows.
Infinite loops. And
stuff. They have like infinite loops in there, and they have no concept of what they're doing. So like even with flows, it's sometimes good to have a bit of a developer background, so you actually can understand how to use them in certain ways.
Yeah.
Because how I might write a flow might be different to how an admin might write a flow based on my experience as a dev. Like they'll use probably way less variables, for example. They probably won't understand. They might like start like hard coding things in there. They wouldn't really know what to do with that.
Or
so
they'd go the opposite way, and they'd overuse variables. I've seen that as well.
Yeah, where they put everything into it.
Yeah, just loads of unnecessary stuff that just doesn't need to be there, like loops and loads of decision statements that just don't need to be there when you can just do it really easily.
Yeah.
So I think it's that like the admin mindset versus like the developer mindset is also really important.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's something. Pablo Gonzalez, I don't know if you know him, he's a big DevOps guy, but he wrote a post on the site the other day talking about that, saying, flows are great, but you do need to have some control over...
Definitely.
Overseeing, maybe more junior people are building them and don't necessarily, know best practice, because they can cause some harm as well.
Yeah, and you go into certain orgs, and there's like 50 flows on one object. And then you're like, well, which triggers first? Like how, like note and then note.
Is it just one per object?
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of information out there on what you should do, but like it's kind of the same idea as triggers. Like these record triggered flows are basically triggers. It's kind of the same idea. Like you should have one per object, and at least you know how it, like when it's going to execute. Let's say you've got 3 flows on the same object that are the exact same type of flow. You don't know which is going to go first, and that's not good. It's better just to have one big flow that has like subflows within it.
Yeah,
it's usually a better way to do it. But yet again, the reason why devs would know to do it that way is because that's the same way you'd build a trigger framework, and that's kind of what we have learned from that. So we kind of know how to do that into flows. But some admins, for example, might not know that. A lot of admins will, because there's enough resources online. But it's like an idea that has been taken from like a developer practice, and that's kind of why it's in there.
Yeah, like using subflows is literally just a form of making methods. So it's I think starting on Flow as an admin is a good way to actually maybe start becoming a developer, because it teaches you a lot of the basic concepts of being a developer.
It's interesting that kind of admins and devs probably used to be very separate, because devs were like Lightning Web Components, Apex. Admins were like workflow rules, custom objects, approval rules, whatever. And now actually there's quite a lot of overlap in the role. Admins are learning more dev concepts, and devs are learning
100%.
more, which is quite interesting actually.
Yeah, it's just to do with what Salesforce are bringing out, like platform events. For example, they're something that before, it's the idea of platform events is pretty much you have a record might change, and then you fire an event out, and it can be picked up by an integration service like MuleSoft, for example.
Yeah.
And an admin can technically build that part of the platform event completely. Whereas before, that wouldn't be the case. You'd pretty much be always doing that in code. There was no way to do it. So all you would really need for that project, for example, might be a MuleSoft dev and an admin. Whereas before, you might need like a Salesforce dev and then a MuleSoft guy, or you might need like a Salesforce dev to do all of the end-to-end process. Whereas now you can like separate out a little bit, because there are bits now that you can do with like a flow in the front end, because platform events can be done completely through flows now. So it's
I think that's a good point though. You might still need a developer on the Salesforce side in case the flows like errors, because I think admins aren't very good at debugging. So if you tell an admin to go and look through a load of debug logs, I don't think they'd know what to look for.
Controversial statement.
Yeah, it does depend on the type of admin. I mean, like the flows
smart
are
admin,
flows are pretty easy to debug now. That again, it's that thing of how far flows have become. Like the way to debug them now, it literally shows you, lights up which bit's broken.
That's only when you debug it. You click the debug.
Yeah, well, that is the
But what if it just breaks?
To
and then
be
you have to go
fair,
and,
I'm fanning the flames of the admin dev war, but to be fair, I think you're meant to do something with debugging in flows, right? You're meant to put a debug path.
They have
which
like
isn't
error
really
paths now.
an admin concept.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's more in code that you do that. But
Yeah.
now, obviously, best practice is to do this so admins are learning it. You know, that's what,
Yeah, it's good.
But it's like you said, it's just a good start way to get in. If they wanted to get into coding, it's a good way. Like they are learning programming practices because of that, which is great because it does mean that like there is more they can do. And it used to be genuinely like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember people like being like, I have a flow problem. Can I get a dev?
Yeah.
And it's like that. You don't need that now, really.
I wonder if there's. The more we talk about this, the more I'm thinking: is there a new role opening up here? Like, because admins.
Admineloper.
Yeah.
Have you not heard of that?
No.
It's
that a
like
thing?
it's.
I hate that.
But it's referring to more of an admin and a developer, which I guess you guys kind
Something in
of
the
are
middle.
because you know both. You came from admin backgrounds and
I'd say we're
I
definitely
didn't-
more developers.
didn't.
We
Yeah,
can
I
just
didn't
do-
come from admin background. I was like computer science and dev, but
Sam can't build a report.
well, yeah, I couldn't build a report for many years. I didn't need to. I still don't have an admin cert. But no, my difference was that I then moved heavily into like config side for a little bit, just because of the projects I was getting, which was really good because I think one of the best things you can do as a dev is understand better what core Salesforce does, so you actually know when it's right to use code, for example.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people will just like, I've seen people who just overcomplicated things in code because they didn't know Salesforce could do something on its own.
Yeah.
And that's terrible because it just means for a client, they have to maintain the code side of it, or they're going to have to pay a dev. They're going to have to pay another consultancy to get a dev. And it's just not great.
I mean, just to kind of hammer home the point before we move into the next section, because we spoke about this in one of our last podcast episodes, which was with Matt, a technical architect from Salesforce, and he was just like, at the moment, he is trying to migrate so much custom stuff to standard stuff in Salesforce and I guess you guys like think the same, right?
Yeah, 100%. You have to do it. It's just like it depends. Like it depends if like I've had it where clients move from one org to a whole brand new org, and then you've just gone for like you have to pretty much go line by line on what they've got, and then you can just recreate a lot of it in standard Salesforce because other companies have overcomplicated it. There are use cases where like you are still going to have to do it custom, and a lot of it will still be custom, but like sometimes I've taken out over 50% of custom code just because it's not needed anymore.
Yeah. Speaking about infinite loops earlier, do you remember when we
I was afraid you were going to bring this up.
infinite? I can't remember
I do
exactly
remember.
what.
It was
It was
email to
we.
case.
I like to blame it on you for many years, but I think I was definitely
my fault.
overseeing. But it was
definitely
what
my
was it? It
fault.
was
It was an email to case,
case.
infinite loop. So I can't remember exactly. I
You're
don't
just
even
bashing
think you
admins
can-
about infinite loops.
Hilarious. At least I've learned from my mistakes. It was like something like the routing address. I set the routing address to be.
Or it was like no, it was the autoresponder.
That
was
was
the
it.
same as
The auto response address was the same as the email to case address.
Can you
So
even
it
do
would-
that now?
No, you don't think you can. I don't think you can.
No, but back then, yeah.
Back then you
no,
probably
no,
could.
okay.
But yeah, I set it and I was like, I did like a quick test and I was like, oh, this works. And then we literally left their office, I remember. And we were on the train and you got a call. And it's like, yeah, our inboxes are filling up with like thousands of emails. And I was like,
It was like tens of thousands. I think, yeah.
Wait, was this still when you weren't getting paid?
No.
If it was when you weren't getting paid, I think I'd understood. But now you actually were getting paid.
No, that was bad.
Okay. All right. Moving on. AI. So something that our devs survey revealed is that I think it was like 80% of developers or 60% of developers were using it on a regular basis, like on a
60%.
So it was like something like 40% on a regular basis and 30% now and then. So there was only 30-20% that weren't using it at all. So most people were using it fairly regularly. But Sam, you're using it pretty regularly.
lot.
Tell us about it.
I think when you've been a dev for quite a while, a lot of the times like you're going to rebuild something you've already done before. And obviously it's a good time to like maybe to reuse something that you've got. But a lot of the time you can just literally put it into ChatGPT, ask it a really simple question, and you don't need to know exactly, like you might not need to know the exact line of code off your head. You can just put it into ChatGPT rather than like digging through forums or digging through Stack Overflow.
So is this like, let's say you're, I don't know, building a class or something, and your brain just gets a bit stumped with what to do next? Is it that kind of
a
question?
bit of both. So there's two. There's one where like I already know what I'm going to do, and rather than me just writing out 100 lines of code, I can literally just chat GPT and it'll give you a big chunk of what you need, and then you just need to like personalize it for exactly what you're going to do. Like I've had it before where like I'm going to build like a really basic trigger framework. I've built tons of them before. Rather than me like going into like some sort of like me going to like Bitbucket and then pulling out of a repo of like a really like standard one, I can just chat GPT. It's gonna give me 90% of what I need, and then I just need to tweak it ever so slightly. And it's just like a really easy, quick way for me to go in and pull that. But then at the same time, when I have questions, you can ask it, and it will give you out great replies most of the time. Sometimes, like I had one today where like I asked it a question when I was doing something for an unlock package for DevOps. I asked it a question. It did not give me the answer that was even close to correct. And like I asked it like 4 more questions to be even more specific. Like you have to be quite specific with it to get the answer you want, and it just couldn't get close. But that's because then when I started Googling it, like it was that like the Salesforce documentation was also really bad for it as well.
Okay.
So I have a feeling it was probably just pulling from the documentation, and then I ended up just finding it somewhere else on Stack Overflow. So like that's sometimes where it's bad, but if it's like something fairly simple, it can just spit out exactly what you need, and it does help so much.
But you can kind of, because people have been talking about productivity gains and, adding like, was it trillions to the world GDP or something? Like,
Doesn't surprise me.
But you can kind of see it, especially when you're, more experienced using it, because I use it for kind of inspiration when I'm writing content. If I'm writing about a subject I know a bit about but not a huge amount about, then I can kind of use it to bring up some content and like, verify it, because I know a bit about it. And I suppose it's the same with you. If a junior dev was using it,
it's a little bit more dangerous.
I'd be worried for 2 reasons. One, they couldn't verify it, and 2, they're not really learning. You know what I mean? You need your fundamentals first before you kind of...
Yeah, so it is, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it is, when you already know what you need from it, that's when it's quite helpful. So it's like, if let's say, I need some really simple help on an integration that I've built probably like 30 or 40 in my life, it's really fine to go and ask that question there, and it will just spit out something for me really easily. But if it's like if it's something that I needed to learn brand new, then how am I going to actually understand what it's telling me? And at that point, it's not really helpful whatsoever. So if let's say I was like 6 months into my job when I was a dev at the start, if I was asking it questions, I'd probably just start putting that straight into my literally into my classes and hope that it was right rather than actually knowing that it's right. Whereas now I'm like cherry picking bits. I'm picking out the bits that I know are actually helpful, but that's only because I've done it enough time that I know what's going on. Whereas for newer stuff, for me, it's probably not as helpful, and I probably spend more time actually trying to understand what's going on.
Have you tried anything else apart from ChatGPT?
No, not at all. I actually don't know what there is.
Is there other ones?
Well, there's GitHub Copilot.
Oh yeah, we're using Teams Copilot, which is quite cool.
Is that the same?
It
like
summarizes
coding?
your meetings for you.
Oh, it's not coding.
No.
No, it's nothing to do with coding.
So I did
It's AI.
I did use something a while ago that I forgot about. I used a plugin that used to generate a test class for you off the back of an Apex class. So it would actually read.
Cool.
It would read what you like. You can still do it. I could go into ChatGPT and say, write me a test class for a call out to an Azure database, for example, and it would do that, and it would do it fairly well. But at the time, I would have an ability in VS Code that I could right click on a class, and it had like an option that would generate this like test class for me. Yeah, again, probably like 50 to 60% correct, and it wouldn't do exactly what I would say is good practice, but it would give me a really good baseline on what I needed. Like it'd have a test setup method at the start where it'd like create a load of data for me. I'd say I could tell it like, oh, I want you to create like these lists of objects for me, and it would do that. It'd create all those records for me, and I wouldn't have to worry about doing that.
Surely it would only
bit.
use like standard fields, right, when it creates the data?
No, because it would check the fields you're using inside your class.
Okay.
So it would then know that
But it wouldn't know about like validation rules and stuff like that, right?
No, it wouldn't know. It has no idea about that. It's like it always needs manual intervention.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I'm
Also, again, it's the framework that you...
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not expecting my job to become me asking ChatGPT a question. If it could, I probably wouldn't be getting
a
paid.
job.
Like you wouldn't need us anymore. Like you would just have admins doing it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's interesting to hear from a developer how people are using it, because they clearly are. And I think actually it's probably, there's been a lot of news recently about how big tech companies being criticized because AI isn't delivering as fast as investors want.
Yeah.
But I think this is one area where probably, I think Microsoft own GitHub actually, and I'm sure that's probably doing quite well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So segueing now into a bit of Salesforce developer careers. So we're going to cover kind of how to get into a developer career path as well as the job market. And the job market is particularly interesting because when we spoke before, it was quite surprising to me that you said the job market was actually pretty robust for developers. So we've just had a podcast episode where we kind of covered the market and the trends that we've been seeing, the layoffs and the kind of boom of 2020 to 2022. And it's kind of been a decline. And it's been kind of the first time in the Salesforce job market where people are struggling to land jobs. But you guys are saying that you're getting recruiters in your inbox on the daily.
Yeah. So, I mean, I literally had 3 today. Ping me from LinkedIn. I'd say I get roughly between 6 and 7 a week, recruiters and other people on LinkedIn pinging me. So I think it's definitely maybe slowed down a bit. I'd say maybe
which is crazy that it was more than that.
Yeah, it was insane. Although I think the more I think about it, I think it might have been when I actually got promoted and went up to senior. I think maybe a lot of people saw that and was like, senior, and then they just sort of like, whew. So it's maybe slowed down a bit now, but it's still a lot.
When you didn't you do like some sort of questions and asking people about like how many people are like ping them and stuff? Did you ask like a question on LinkedIn? No, I thought you asked people on that.
Not sure.
I thought you started out like because you were saying about how the job market's declining and stuff. All right, I think it does depend on your level of where you are in your career, and that's going to change the levels of in people that are in your inbox asking you to like have an interview. Like I think when I first started, I think my first year I didn't really have much at all. Like I think I probably had like a couple a month maybe, and obviously and just because it's someone saying like here's a job, it doesn't mean that you're even going to be close to meeting that or you even have a chance of getting that job. It just means that like people are actually messaging you about stuff.
Yeah.
And then like once my job title changed, I noticed I started to get both my new job title and my old job titles jobs coming into my inbox.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't get like ones for like a junior dev anymore, but like it keeps going where for like a certain time you will still get a mix of those roles. Like you probably, James, you'll still get ones that are just for like a non-senior dev. You'll just get ones, and it's just kind of the way it goes. And it also does change, it has changed in the past couple of years. Like post-COVID, the first 6 months after COVID, there was like nothing, and then once like the businesses all picked up again, it went crazy. And then it did slow down a little bit after that again, but I think now, I don't know, in London especially, it's pretty much the same.
I wonder if it's getting harder to actually hire the right people as well because of the fact that flows are getting so much better and there's sort of like a weird in-between between an admin and a developer now. The company might not actually be sure what it is they're looking for, because if they say they're looking for a dev, but then actually they're just looking for someone to come and do flows.
I think there's always been a bit of that. There's quite a lot of talk on just the internet generally about, people putting job descriptions out which say they want a Salesforce admin, but then they're like 5 years Apex, 5 years Lightning Web Components.
One of my favourite ones was there was someone who put out one where it was like for a language that had only been out for like 10 years, and the person was like 15 years experience in this language, and then the person was like, I wrote this language and I can't even get this job.
It is a bit ridiculous. So I mean, I think developer careers are quite elusive for quite a lot of people, I think, because you do need to know how to code, which is a huge barrier to entry. But, for those that are maybe, an admin, maybe they're quite senior, maybe they know Flow, what are some considerations to begin a career as a Salesforce developer? Like, what kind of person do you have to be?
Maybe very logical minded, I'd say, for sure. I mean, it's kind of hard to answer because I think, we both did computer science at uni. So we already have that mindset, and that we sort of knew that's what we wanted to do in life. And both very logical minded people. So I think if you didn't do that, actually I had a friend who did geography at uni, and then he messaged me 2 years ago and said, oh, I'm a software developer now. I was like, oh, and he was like, yeah, well, it's just where the money is. I'm not going to get anything doing geography. So should have really asked him more about how he got into that. But I assume you just have to use all the resources available to you and just slowly learn how to code.
Definitely YouTube.
Yeah.
Just like YouTube tutorials and everything. Like, even though I did 3 years of a computer science degree, I've learned more from YouTube than that 3 years of that computer science degree. And it's not even close.
Wow.
Like, through university, like, obviously you learn like learn multiple languages as well. You never learn to become like actually very good at one specific language. At least I didn't anyway.
Yeah,
like even though I did 2 years of one, that was like the most. I never did all 3 years of one language.
LabVIEW, which was, did you ever do LabVIEW?
What?
LabVIEW, it was like this point and click. It was like kind of like a flow builder. I just never used it again.
No, no, we did like research languages, so languages that only the university had. So stuff like that. So like,
That's
but
helpful.
no, because it's learning concepts. So that's the idea.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying earlier with the flows, that you are learning programming concepts, and it does make sense to you. So it might like right now I might not know a certain language. Like I don't know Ruby, for example, which is a programming language. I wouldn't know what that is, but if I saw it, I'd probably understand it based on my. Like I wouldn't understand line by line exactly what it's doing, but I'd understand parts of it, and you're kind of equating it back to what you already know. So like if I was trying to get into it like a completely new language now, and I didn't have any like understanding of programming whatsoever, I'd probably pick up a really simple language like C, for example, and I'd try and learn how to learn that through like YouTube videos, and then like another like Java's pretty easy to learn afterwards, and the bigger language that you pick as well, so like something like Java that's used by millions and millions and millions of people. That's a really good one to learn because there's going to be millions of YouTube videos about it as well. Like I think I learned from some like random Indian dude, and it was just like people, every the comments like, "Thank you so much, like you're the best person ever," and I was like, "Yes."
And do you think like anyone can be a Salesforce developer? Because I like read up about, you know, when I was an admin, I started to, I don't know if you know David Liu, he was like an OG.
Oh wait,
Salesforce
I thought it was
blogger.
Google. Wasn't it Google?
He was at Google,
Yeah.
but he was like OG Salesforce blogger, and you know, it's like intro blogs to code. And I don't know if it's because my attention span's really short, or maybe I'm just not made up for being a developer. But I gave it a go, and I got the concepts, but it just was so hard for me. So I just gave up, and I was like, I'll just be an admin.
Yeah,
But
it's
do you think like
really steep learning curve.
do you think though that if people give it a go and they just can't,
I think everyone
get
can
their head
do
around
it.
Do you think you should push through,
Yeah,
or do you
yeah.
think?
I don't know, because I think it's the same. Because you used to get like kids at school, and I think a lot of people struggle with maths, right? I think if you struggle with maths, you're probably going to struggle with code.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of similar like logic based stuff like that, and I think, yeah, I'd say no. I don't think everyone can be a developer, to be honest. I think you have to have the right sort of mind. I mean, there are some people out there who are terrible at maths and hate maths and logic, but could train themselves to eventually get it, sure. But there's definitely people who would just give
people
up.
who just can't. Yeah.
I disagree with that. I think pretty much everyone can do it. It just takes time, and it is that thing of like you just said then that like you started doing it and you found it like you didn't really like it and you just gave up on it. But like I find that with other stuff, but then you can kind of just like if you carry on going, you will understand it. I don't think anyone has like a brain barrier where they will never understand how to write in a certain programming language. I don't think that's really true. I think it will take certain people longer, but then at the same time, it is just a big like quite a steep learning curve with programming. Like that first like year can be quite like confusing, and then I find that once you've got like a fairly good understanding of how to code, it kind of like at that point it does become much easier, and like learning how to ask the right questions is a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
And it's just I think pretty much anyone could do it.
Yeah. I guess you got to see progress is the main thing, right?
Yeah,
You gotta
100%.
see, even if it's slow, see slow progress, and then I mean, what do you think about Salesforce certifications then? So,
I love how you're laughing about it.
because I know
Laughing
your
before you even
opinions
ask
on
the
them.
question.
But like I mean, in just very quickly, in general, what are your opinions about Salesforce certs?
My general opinion is that there's loads of them, and that I think I don't think they're entirely necessary, but I think they are a good thing to do to help you learn about Salesforce stuff, new things and concepts, and they are also very well recognized. I think everyone knows that. Like if someone's got like 20 certifications in Salesforce, you're going to be like, oh wow, he knows his
Because
stuff.
you've done your share. You did was it sharing one recently?
I did my sharing and visibility architect the other day. Yeah.
Did you learn something new?
Yeah, some very niche things about the fact that
That's
dynamic forms can like render a different form factor, and you can use that as a bit of criteria, which I didn't know. So just random stuff like that. But overall,
But
the
will
exam
you
was
ever
pretty
use it?
straightforward, Probably not.
So how about you?
I've always been on like the more negative side for it. 'Cause my problem is like exam dumps as well. Like you do see people who are just passing exams because they're going to exam dumps and they're just learning how to pass the exam rather than actually learning about what the exam's trying to teach you. That's kind of my issue with it, and I don't think everyone like can take an exam the same way. I think it is like you have to learn how to pass an exam sometimes. I'm not a big fan of that. Like I like I said earlier, I don't even have an admin cert. Doesn't mean I can't do anything admin based. It's just that I don't have an admin cert.
What cert do you have?
I only have one. I only have developer.
Platform Dev 1?
Yeah, and I don't have Platform Dev 2. I don't have anything else. I've just never even bothered. Because for me, I would rather be on a project than learning. Like, there are people who would rather be doing certs and be on a project. And for me, I do not enjoy revising for a cert.
Oh, yeah, same.
Because some of the questions you get asked on these certifications, you will never use the answer. Yeah, you will learn some good things from them, and I don't doubt that. And it's probably a really good base level to get. Let's say if I was an admin, for example, and I wanted to become a dev, probably doing PD1 is a great idea. You will learn some really helpful stuff from that. As long as you like actually try and like apply it, you will learn some really good stuff from it. But the PD1, some of the questions in there, in 8 years of being a dev, I have never used that, and I probably never will.
Like, I got one, it was, what's the maximum file size you can upload to Chatter or something like that? It's 2 gig. 2 gig, yeah.
Is it 2
Seems
gig?
unnecessary.
Yeah, 2 gig.
Right.
Didn't
Yeah,
know
it's
that.
just like there are those, like, you have to learn, like that time you're learning the answer to that rather than it being helpful for you in any way. But I think it's a really good base to get them.
So what about if someone is wanting to be a dev? Do you think Platform Dev 1 is
100%.
good in that case? Because
Yeah, definitely. And PD1's not heavily code based anyway.
Yeah.
PD1 is it doesn't
Yeah,
it doesn't.
a lot of flow stuff in there, isn't it?
Well, it's just it's got a lot of like best practice stuff in there as well. It doesn't. It's not going to make you write unless it. I mean, I got mine like 5 years ago.
I think
6
there's a
years ago.
few like codey questions, but a lot of it's concepts.
Yeah.
Like, why should you use a batch class over a queuable class? Or
Which
like
is
what's,
really
and
good.
what's a future method?
Which is
and
good
stuff
for
like
someone
that.
that's
That is,
perfect
which is
for
really,
someone
really good.
learning.
Yeah.
Who's not on the job, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, PD1 is the best way, 100% one of the best ways to transition from being an admin to being a dev, because it does ask the right questions and you do learn those, and they are actually important in that. It's just some of the certs like I remember people just being like, oh, you should pass this cert, it's really easy. And I'm like, why? Like, what's it going to help me? And they're, oh no, it's good, just get the cert. And I'm like, but what? I will do a cert if it's going to teach me something, it's going to stick with me, and that's where I kind of struggle with it. Whereas if I'm on a project and I'm learning something new, it's going to stick with me that way, because I remember I learned it from that project. Whereas if I'm just like looking at a load of exam questions,
Yeah, I think experience will always trump certifications.
Did you see the meme we posted the other day?
which one?
The Turkish guy from the Olympics, you know, the one.
Oh,
his
yeah.
pocket. We did him. And it was like developer, 8 years experience, no certifications, and then we put the Korean woman with a South Korean woman with loads of like gear on her face.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
500 trail badges, 16 times certified. And it wasn't. People took it in a very political way. Not
That's
political,
hilarious.
but,
Oh,
you know,
God.
trying to divide the ecosystem, and people were trying to work out like, but the Turkish guy only got silver medal, stuff like that. But it was just a meme. But the comments were funny because people have such polarized opinions on it.
Yeah.
They're like, certs are rubbish.
Yeah.
Certs are great. And
Yeah.
it seemed like, you know, of course there's a middle ground.
I think
There is.
there is a middle ground. I just think I definitely think it's more like, I do think I'm always going to be leaning more heavier towards project, like being on project work or actually doing some real builds. And I'm probably like 80-20.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot more people are closer towards like 60-40, something like that.
But maybe let's say you're an admin at the moment and you work hard and you get your PD1, PD2, maybe that sets you up to actually get a job, because PD2 is not easy, is it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
It
I-
definitely
get
looks
you a
good
job
on your
as a
resume.
semi-developer, admin developer.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's like a different thing. Like, I guess me and you don't really have that experience of trying to apply for a dev job when we were an admin. But if you were an admin, it might be a really good idea to try and get those. And then, because I think when you do PD2, make sure you get loads of super badges as well. And for some people,
which
they
are
might.
hands-on, right?
Yeah,
super
you,
badges
you
quite
have
good,
to.
actually.
Yeah, PD2 you have to actually write a load of code for it, so it does make sense.
Very cool. So just before we end then, so let's talk a bit about developer career paths and kind of where it can take you. And I think something that was very clear from our upcoming salary survey is that developers get paid more than admins. And it kind of makes sense because the barrier to entry is a lot higher, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, there was the big trailblazer movement where Salesforce were encouraging people, admins to get into the ecosystem. You know, because the barrier to entry is so low, it makes sense that it's, you know, that salary would be lower. And it kind of, you know, possibly means, unfortunately, maybe the admin salary will continue to come down because the market is so saturated with admins, you know, that naturally supply and demand and stuff like that, salaries will start to come down. But developers possibly stay the same, you know, probably won't come down. So give us a bit of an overview about where you can go in a developer career path, like what are the different routes?
Sure. So I think there's 2 different routes from being a developer. You can either stick it out as a dev and really own your skills, become really senior developer, keep building and writing code, or you can sort of go the more architecture route where you take a step back from writing code and building, and you sort of more look at the overall picture of the whole solution.
Yeah.
Which is more what Sam does.
Yeah, it changes what you do on your day to day. So like when you're a dev, you will be building for a higher percentage of your hours that you're working. You'll be sat in in the dev console or sat in VS Code, building like writing classes, writing LWCs. Whereas what I do now, I probably am closer to like 50-50, where like 50% I'm spending time on calls with clients, trying to understand exactly what they need, like pulling out requirements, and then spending time on my own, trying to convert those requirements into an actual Salesforce solution. And then I still do build. Like there are a lot of solution architects who won't do any build. Yet again, I think that'll depend on things like project size and based on like the actual specific project. Like the project you're on, if let's say there's not as many devs on there and I'm a SA on there, I might still be writing code for them. But then it also depends on like the company that you work for as well. Like the company I work for are quite relaxed and I can still write code and there's no issue with that. Whereas some places, if you're an SA or TSA, you're literally just going to be writing like documentation back to back to back every single day. And it does depend where you want to go. Like I think there are a lot of devs who do want to stick writing code. I think you do, right?
Yeah,
you just
I think you kind of get capped though, like in terms of moving up. You can't. I don't even really know if there's anywhere to go once you get to a certain seniority of like being a dev and you still want to build. You just get more and more complex.
That is the top, right?
Yeah,
if you want to build, you
kind of have to stay where you are.
Senior,
unless you get really lucky and you like become an architect, and then they really need someone to build, and you can sort of slip in and do a bit of build every now and then.
But I think that's also fine because I can't remember off the top of my head what the salaries were for senior Salesforce developers, but I would imagine it was probably very high. I think the average for a mid-level in the US was $120,000. So, and technical architect was about 170,000 average in the US. So senior dev is definitely going to be nearly up there with that. So
for sure, yeah.
It's
enough.
There are like Salesforce is a bit of it's quite different to other industries as well when it comes to like dev. Like you kind of get like super senior, like really, really senior devs in that Oracle, for example, who can be have done 20 years for it, and you don't really find that in Salesforce as much, where there's like someone who's just been a dev for 15 odd years.
Yeah.
It's usually that they move into architecture roles.
Yeah.
I mean, I prefer it. I don't know if everyone would do, but I way prefer it. I find it more interesting. It's more hands-on. You're not just sat coding for 8 hours a day every day. Like I did enjoy doing that at points, but less so now. And it does depend on exactly what you want your day to look like. Like if you would prefer not to be on calls with a client.
Yeah, I think
whether
or not you want to be client facing or customer facing is a big point as well, because some devs are not good in social situations, which is maybe a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I think a lot of people would want to just, sit down and just mind their own business and just do their work. Whereas some other people are like, oh no, I could, I'd get in front of a client, take a few meetings. So I think it depends what you want really.
Yeah, and if you do have better soft skills, you are probably always going to lend to becoming an architect or a better architect than some other people will. And you do tend to you will actually as long as you enjoy having those conversations with clients, you'll be fine. But if you really don't and you dread them and you feel anxious before going onto those calls, you're not going to enjoy being an architect. Just stay being a senior developer, and you can always learn. It's not like you. I think you said earlier about getting capped. Like you do get capped in certain things, but you can still become a way better dev than you were 4 or 5 years ago, for example, 100%. Even if you are a senior dev.
And you can always move types of company, right? You can go to an ISV, you can go to a consultancy, you can go to an admin. It's all different kind of vibes.
And there's the amount of clouds that Salesforce are bringing out now as well. There's an infinite number of things to learn.
Omni Studio.
Yeah, Omni Studio.
I do a lot
Data
of Omni
Cloud,
Studio.
There's loads of stuff. So
very true. Just going to pause there. Can we? Oh, okay. We just need to wrap up. Can I go to the toilet really quick?
Yeah, of course. Oh, Ben.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sam.
Cheers, mate.
Happy birthday to you.
And we have a present as well.
I don't think you understand how much I struggled. Thank you so much. What do I do with this now?
Oh, it's the present.
Yeah, we just got a cake. That cake looks good.
So what
How much you really
many
want that cake,
people might not know is Sam, his alter ego is actually DJ Crabman. And he DJ'd our House of Cloud
Oh,
party.
no, you haven't.
So we
Oh,
got
cheers,
you
Ben.
a nice
Show us
present. Yeah, there we go.
That's so cool.
That's
All
so
right.
sick. I actually have one of these at home, but not in a frame.
Oh, there you go.
Well, thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure chatting.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
And yeah,
Thank you very much.
see you soon.
Cheers, Ben.
Cheers, guys.
Bye bye.